Okay, we are recording. Okay. A warm welcome to everyone who is joining us tonight through Facebook or Zoom. Just an FYI to everyone, we did not hold a pre-meeting tonight, but I would like to call to order the Holiday City Planning Commission meeting on Tuesday, January 19th, 2021 at 6 o'clock on the nose. My name is Jan Bradshaw, and I'm the chair of the Holiday Planning Commission with Chris Layton as my vice chair. Planning commissioners joining tonight. Right now, I can see Marianne Ricks and Mackin. Let's see, Howard Layton.
Just got on.
Great. How are you, Howard? And hopefully Elisa Lloyd and Marty Banks will also join us. We also have with us tonight from the city of Holiday, our planning manager, John Tierlink, and our city recorder, Stephanie Carlson, that will probably leave us soon. Before we start on our agenda, I'd like to read the following statements. The first one is regarding COVID-19. I, Jan Bradshaw, as the chair of the City of Holiday Planning Commission, do hereby find and declare as follows. Due to the emergency conditions which currently exist in the state of Utah, and specifically in Salt Lake County and the city of Holiday, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the holding of public meetings with an anchor location, as defined in the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act, presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location, and the risk to those who may be present at an anchor location can be substantially mitigated by holding public meetings of the Planning Commission pursuant to electronic means that allow for public participation via virtual means. And the city has the means and ability to allow virtual participation in the public meetings in accordance with the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act. Now, therefore, based upon the foregoing, for 30 days from the date of this order, meetings of the City of Holiday Planning Commission shall be conducted by virtual means without an anchor location. And this was dated the 3rd of January. Now I'd just like to read a short summary about the Planning Commission. The City of Holiday Planning Commission is a volunteer citizen board whose function is to review land use plans and other special studies, make recommendations to the city council on proposed zoning map and ordinance changes, and approve conditional uses and subdivisions. The Planning Commission does not initiate land use applications, rather acts on applications as they are submitted. Commissioners do not meet with applicants except at publicly noticed meetings. Commissioners attempt to visit each property on the agenda, where the location, the nature of the neighborhood, existing structures, and uses related to the proposed change are noted. Decisions are based on observations, recommendations from the professional planning staff, the city's general plan, zoning ordinance, and other reports, by all verbal and written comments, and by evidence submitted, all of which are part of the public record. So again, some really interesting stuff. We're going to start. We have one action item on our agenda tonight, and that is the approval of the meeting minutes from 12/1/2020. So we will start. John, are you gonna go through those page by page? Okay. So does anyone have anything on page 1?
I do. I do.
Okay, Ann?
As much as I was there at the meeting in spirit and soul, I was not there. So I would like to be struck from the record as I was not.
Okay, Ann.
But I was there in spirit. I felt all of you.
We missed you.
I missed you guys.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't there.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I think we ought to look at line 37.
Okay, 37. Go
Maybe
ahead, Chris.
I don't know, maybe I just couldn't understand what Paul was implying there. It says that the business, let me move people out of the way. There we go. That the business fits within what has generally been seen in terms of impact.
So you wanted to say within? That's how you read it.
They were missing something there.
Oh, no, I misread it. I'm not sure I understand what that was correctly worded, that the business fits with what has generally been seen in terms of impact. Do you guys all understand that?
Well, I think he's saying this business is in line with other businesses that we have seen and impacts we have seen. That's
So
how.
if you read the whole sentence, Mr. Allred believed that based on the discussion points of concern, the findings and conditions set forth in the staff report, that the business fits with what has generally been seen in terms of impact.
Oh, like in terms of impact, of what impact it had on things. It's similar to others. Okay, I
Okay,
gotcha.
okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I had the same comment. I think it clears it up if in the line 36, Mr. Allred believed that insert comma, based on the discussions, points of concern, the findings and conditions set forth in the staff report, then there's already a comma, and then delete the word that.
And then you're okay with the rest of the sentence?
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah. I am, that helps. Good job.
okay. Did you get that, John?
Yes.
Okay, anything else? I'm looking at line 46, right at the bottom. It just doesn't make sense to me. That says there is a factual inquiry for the planning commission to determine. Should it say to make or determine? What should that say?
I think it just says do determine.
Just to determine? So take out to make?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so just
Or
take it
to
out.
make a determination.
To make a determination of the origin.
But I think you just strike to determine. To make.
There is a factual inquiry for the planning commission to determine. Yeah, so get out to make. Yeah, I think that's okay. Everyone in agreement with that?
Andy.
Okay, page 2. Page 3.
this is Marty. I have a comment on line 27.
Okay,
I think it reads smoother if it reads, will be minimal, insert and between minimal and staff.
the impacts will be minimal and staff recommended yeah, I agree with you. I had highlighted that too.
Sorry, are we on page 3?
We're on page 3, line 27. Will be minimal and staff recommended approval. So it needs an and after minimal.
More substantively, though, it's the next paragraph. It's the next two paragraphs that I think we need to talk about. On line 30, there's a sentence that says, in response to a question raised, Mr. Blakesley identified the following circumstances under the home occupation ordinance where no license is required. Then it lists 3 things. The next sentence says, starting on line 40, the application was before the commission because the applicant expects customers to patronize the business. My recollection is that the application was before the commission on a conditional use permit.
Right. It is a condition. Yes.
Therefore, whether a license is required or not, I'm not seeing how that's relevant. And the way this reads leaves you with the impression that whether a license is required is determinative of whether the conditional use permit ought to be approved.
John, what do you think?
Well, I think it was really pertinent that our legal counsel make mention that these are the items that don't require a conditional use permit. And maybe
Well,
that's what we're missing is
Okay, so
not
say that
license,
in
but
that
conditional
sentence.
use.
Yeah.
Yes, do that. Yes. Then I think it clears it up. Do you agree with that, Marty?
Well, I don't know off the top of my head, John, if you're telling us that those three criteria are the criteria for conditional use permit, great, that does clear it up, and we can simply delete the word no license and plug in there conditional permit. We can
Can you-
substitute.
Can you see that John is typing that in on the screen, Marty? Do you have that up?
Yeah,
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 perfect.
because a
Got it,
license is
got it.
required either way. It's the premise is a conditional use permit.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that solves it.
Okay.
perfect. Good catch. Thank you, Marty. Okay, so page 3, we're done. How about page 4?
Actually, can we go back to page 3? I was been thinking about that line 40. It says the application was before the commission because the applicant expects customers to patronize the business. I think you can patronize a business without physically going there. And I think the clarification is that the concern was that customers were actually coming to the home. And so I'm wondering if there needs to be something more
Different
put in
word.
there that reflects customers physically going to the home rather than just patronizing.
Well, I think
Maybe
you
it
just-
should say patronize the business in person. This, even though they purchase it online, they're still going to come to the homeowner's home and purchase it in
I
person.
agree. I think that's
Yeah.
great, Ann.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and that clarifies it.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on page 3? How about page 4? Page 5? I've got something on page 5, line 28. It says number 3. It just, business operations is proposed as low impact will all operations occurring within the home. So it just doesn't make sense.
I think this means to say with.
I think it should be with, yeah.
With,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, that's all I found. Anybody else? Okay, page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9.
So nobody got to those either, eh?
What are you talking about?
Nothing.
Oh, Chris.
We sailed through the end of that one. Woo!
Okay, good job, Terry. We love Terry. She does a great job. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Madam Chair, this is Ann. I would like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of December 1st, 2020 as updated this evening.
Great. We have a motion on the table from Ann. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mary Ann. Okay, let's have a vote. Chris,
Aye.
Mary Ann,
Aye.
Ann,
Aye.
Elisa, have you joined us? Okay, Howard,
Aye.
Marty,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Okay, so we've got 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Okay, that was the big majority of our meeting this evening. We will now move into our work session covering the 2021 ordinance amendments, the schedule and drafts overview. And we're going to turn the time over to John.
Thank you, Chair Bradshaw. Basically tonight, what I'd like to do is give you an overview as to what the accomplishments the staff has been able to try to bring to the Planning Commission before the City Council, and it makes a final decision on some needful draft amendments and changes to the ordinance. To start things off, I think you've all received another email from me that has an R1 worksheet, a PDF.
Mhm.
Chris, you're going to be familiar with this, maybe even Alyssa, because this is the worksheet that we hand out to residents and designers, home designers, to use in interpreting our ordinance. And I think it would be really helpful if we went through this really quickly to help the Planning Commission understand what entails a zoning review when a new home is constructed. Because once we get into these omnibus sections, I think it's going to be much more helpful if you had a background as to what how these codes are applied and what possibly the issues that staff has come up with in interpreting those ordinances that will help not only designers but residents find out how the zoning code is applied to their property and how they can quickly and effectively design either an addition or a new home on their lot. So Commissioner Layton, I'm going to rely on you quite a bit as well too, because you're probably going to be in the middle of these as you go through new home builds yourself. So to start off,
Well, to start off, I'd like to say this is awesome. And my first reaction to it was, have I forgot to fill this out before?
Oh, great. That's what I didn't want to hear.
Well, no, I mean, it's really, really a good document.
well, yeah, and we've had several iterations. This is the most recent one.
Yeah.
And they probably were a one-page summary when you were applied for, or maybe submitted for designs.
Mhm.
But anyway, the basic premise here is lot dimension. You know, how wide your property is, how large it is. Is it on a public street or a private road? Most of our ordinances have to do with fitting new development within a street context of existing subdivision development. So unlike other cities where if you find your zone, you have a specific set of standards. The front yard setback is X, it's 30 feet. The side yards are 8 and 10. The rear yard is 25. These are all standards that are pretty set nomenclature for any type of development, whether it be on a 10,000 square foot lot or a 20,000 square foot lot. However, in Holiday, we have a lot of properties, as you know, drive up and down the streets, where larger properties are set right next to smaller lots. And in 2007, this is where we discovered where our issue was. We were standardizing setbacks when our lots aren't standard. So if you have non-standard lots with standardized setbacks, you create problems of the quote unquote McMansion issue that you heard in past news reports and in your neighborhoods, where these larger properties are being developed right next to smaller lots. So long story short, all of the dimensions that are standardized for a setback for front yard, side yard, and rear yard have to do with your lot size. So they're proportionate. So what we do is we require the property size be entered, the property's width, and whether or not it's on a corner, an interior, or on a private driveway. Those will first tell, these numbers right here will first tell the designer or the property owner, or at least give a standard as to where the rest of these ordinances, the front yard, rear yard, and side yards are determined. And you'll see how that's worked through later. And then, of course, whether or not there's some natural hazard features. These are red flag issues for staff to review.
John?
Yes.
Now, because you've just said Holiday City is different in that their restrictions, because you've changed this, so it's not a, every zone has the exact same setback. So that's why you're doing these measurements and everything to make sure it's fair with a bigger home next to a smaller home.
That's right. Regardless of what zone you're in, whether it be R14 all the way up to R1 or 1 acre, these are the setbacks and requirements within those zones.
Yeah, because I think we had, maybe it was 2007, we had the issue of the home that they built it really close to the street.
Sure.
Yes, and the neighbors were furious, but it was too late.
So,
Well, yeah, and we have a lot of neighborhoods and subdivisions from the county era where you can see, if you look at an aerial going up and down the street, where that changed from like a 40 to 45 foot setback to a 30-foot setback. There's these iterations of zoning codes that go along through time. Yeah. And in order to establish a standard setback, it doesn't really fit into the context of the street.
Yeah,
So
I think this is a great idea.
So what I would like to have you do is try to apply these to your lots. Take this later on during this next 2 weeks before we meet again, and try to go through these items as though you're completely rebuilding your home. You can use Google Maps. You can email me for some helps if you'd like. But I'd like to see if you can come up with the setbacks for your property.
Okay.
So
Do we have to admit that we're non-compliant?
Shocking.
Is this?
I fully expect that you're not.
This
This is an inside inspection job to find out where.
It's a sting. I almost fell for that.
Yeah. And so,
Okay.
in other words, Chris, you and I are just gonna lie on this, so we look.
Yeah.
like we're-
La 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 la.
Use your neighbor's house.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, how many casitas did you build in your backyard?
Well, just the
4 or
just
5? They were
three.
they were so cute.
Only
I loved
3. One for each grandchild.
Yeah.
Perfect.
John, isn't Holiday unique? Is it still the case that we have this flexibility in setbacks and averaging going on? Is that still unique to Holiday? Because we talk in terms of standards, but there is some flexibility. Or are other cities embracing that as well?
There are other cities that have
Yeah.
embraced that. Mill Creek has embraced that.
Salt Lake City does.
Salt Lake City averages side yards, yes. And
All right.
that's extremely helpful in that we will no longer, well, it gives a designer, an architect, for example, some design leeway rather than designing boxes. That wall can move in and out and accommodate the homeowner's needs for interior space while still complying with the standard.
Great.
Hey, John, a related question, or maybe a foundational question is, I'm envisioning a couple of McMansions in my neighborhood where the house is disproportionate to the size of the lot. When I think of McMansions, I think of houses that are disproportionate to the lot. And so we got these monster houses on small lots. How does this address that phenomenon? If, for example, lots less than 1.5 acres are still going to have the smaller setback, right?
That's right, yeah.
So I mean, maybe I've misunderstood what you meant by McMansions.
That's a term that's thrown around quite a bit. As far as having a larger property set that could possibly be on a larger lot set to a smaller house that was built maybe in the 40s that's still 1 story to 2 stories maybe. What our ordinance doesn't do in 2007 is it doesn't stifle expansion of properties. It still fully expects that most of our residential neighborhoods will be turned over at some point, but still allowing for the council would still allowed for some flexibility. So yeah, the building areas are a little bit larger than probably what was there initially, but at least what it does is it sets that home in a way that it should be somewhat in line with existing homes on the street.
And it will have a height restriction too.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
lot coverage really
And
helps
lot
with that.
coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So lot coverage restricts the maximum footprint. You'll be able to set up a buildable area, which in this document, you'll see terms of what buildable area is. However, you can't cover 100% of that buildable area. You can only cover, usually depending on the lot size, 20 to 35% of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this first section is how to determine your front yard setback. Essentially what we're looking at is context. So in these boxes here, you're putting the distance from the homes on either side of your subject property, your house, from the street, and you average those.
Got it. Okay,
So-
that's helpful. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, now, John, wonder if you have an outlier next to you that is set way back. Can you skip them and go over to a normal house adjacent to that?
Good
You would think
strategy.
so. Because we're dealing with statistics, You would think so, but there's no provision in the ordinance to omit that outlier. And that could be something that the planning commission could, if you determine it to be a consideration that should be used from a property owner's point of view. You know, we get that question asked daily. Well, this house is next door, but it's twice as far back as the home that I want to rebuild. So it really offsets my numbers. Unfortunately, we have to have that conversation with them that states, you know, yeah, we get it. However, this is how the council set up the ordinance, and that house has to be used.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you do have to use the next door neighbor's house.
Yes. Mhm.
So let's say that in that kind of extreme case, it really does work a hardship. Is there an exception in the averaging process that can be invoked if one qualifies?
Not an exception, but a variance, yes.
Okay,
You
excuse me.
you can definitely request a variance for any one of these standards.
Okay,
And you just go to the, who do you go to? It's just a variance officer,
It's our hearing officer.
a
Yes.
hearing officer.
Mhm.
I think most municipalities, if you have an anomaly like that there's just a couple of homes in a stretch of 10 homes that are set way back, and you happen to fall between them, most cities I've worked with are pretty reasonable about that. Pretty logical. I know Holiday is, so.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, this one section of ordinance, I'm looking at very closely because we've had this applied for almost 15 years now. We are getting a really good data set of what the average of the homes on all streets on Holiday. If you consider just on average, we have anywhere between 10 to 18 new homes that are rebuilt every year. And every one of those homes are using this averaging technique. So therefore, we have quite a few neighborhoods that have done all the averaging work for us. And so it will be really easy to go through and apply set front yards to every street in the city of Holiday.
I see. Now, I wonder if you're next to a private driveway and they're clear back in, are you able to jump over them, or how does that work?
Yeah, so in this scenario, this kind of runs off the diagram here. So if this were our subject lot, and then there's a house next door, but he's on a private driveway, that is a completely different scenario. That's why we want to signal them out. We cross that driveway and go on to the next interior lot,
I see.
and so on.
Okay.
So that's on public roads. On private roads, we have a standard. If the private road is less than 20 feet, you're 30 feet from the center of the right of way. If it's 20 feet or greater, you're 20 feet away. Those are pretty easy. So that's your front yard setback, the average of the homes on the street. Now you're onto your sides and the rear yards. The side yard has to do with the lot's width. So obviously in some of these scenarios, where they're extremely rectangular or square in shape, you know what that lot width is. You can pace it off. You can look at your property description and find what that width is. In this case, we'll use an easy number. Say this is 100 feet wide. What we would do is have that number put in here. In the ordinance, it talks about a percentage of the lot width can be represented in side yard setbacks. So one side has to be 10%, and the other side has to be the remainder of 25%. So a 10 and 15%. So in our 100-foot scenario, we have 10, one on one side, 15 on the other. And what that does is, even though you have a large lot, maybe possibly next to a really small lot, the same proportionality is being used. You're not necessarily using, am I losing my Wi-Fi?
No.
Oh, okay.
you're good.
I got a little note on my screen.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry, if I cut out, that's why. So those are side yard setbacks, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Rear yard, very easy. You find your lot size on the chart and it gives you a number. So those are our what we call our horizontal controls, front, side, and rear. Those are your distances away from property lines. Then we move into the section of the ordinance that talks about vertical controls. In Holiday, we don't only have overall height limits. We have several different controls on how height is measured and regulated. So you have your overall height, which is what your maximum allowed for the lot size is. So finding your lot size, we talk about this a lot. What is the heights allowed on this property is usually the question. And it's not by zone, it's by lot size. So you either have 32, 35, or 40 feet allowed for residential properties. Most of the homes in Holiday hover around this 32-foot line. Those are 15,000 square foot lots or smaller. Then there's some helps here if you're on a slope and how to determine how you can step the height down a slope. And
That's
then
what we was doing on in Holiday Village. We were talking about that.
Yep.
With Chris, right?
Yeah, right.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So to accommodate a slope, you obviously aren't going to be building a diagonal roof line or a wall line, foundation line. It's going to be stepped in some way.
Yeah.
And this is how you use the stepping. A chart to show what your elevations are. That's just to help to verify zone compliance. And then we move on to this idea of building corridor. Building corridor, we had an amendment about 3 months ago, was it, Marianne? 4 months ago?
Yeah, I can't remember. Time
Yeah,
flies.
right. So the building corridor is a measurement of the depth of the homes on either side of you, the same homes that you used in this front yard calculation. Oops, passed it. This one here. So what we're looking at is how deep are the homes on either side, because what that tells us is how deep the home can be built on the lot up to your maximum height. This eliminates the issue of large, deep properties or homes being built deeply on the lot and either obstructing views or having privacy concerns in backyards where homes didn't normally have structure back there.
Well, don't you have a backyard setback? So can't you build your home to that backyard setback?
You can. So in this case, for example, say our backyard setback is 34 feet because we have a 20,000 square foot lot.
Okay.
Yes, you can build all the way up to 34 feet, but if this building corridor tells us that we have a depth of 100 feet and there's still between 100 and that 34-foot line, we have to drop your height down to 20 feet high.
Oh, it's on a height amount.
Yes.
I see.
So anything beyond these lines, this building corridor depth,
I see.
your height has to drop down to 20 feet.
Okay.
So you can still build there.
Yeah.
It just can't be as tall.
Okay.
Now, John, a while ago, we had the issue of people buying, quarter-acre lots, turning them into half-acre lots, and then taking it up higher and changing the setbacks and creating something that doesn't fit in the neighborhood. Did we address that in this somewhere? Or
not in the ordinance? What we did is we prevented them from combining properties, which would be twice the minimum lot size of the zone.
Oh, okay.
I do remember that. Yes.
So if you had two 10,000 square foot lots and you're in a 10,000 square foot zone and you wanted to combine them, the zone would not, or the ordinance wouldn't allow you to do that.
Okay, so if somebody has two quarter-acre lots, they can't combine them for a half acre. They can build a house on there, right? But they
still,
have the setbacks of the quarter-acre restrictions. Is that?
That's true.
Okay, all right.
So that's sort of what the beauty is on this ordinance, is even though you put together those two properties legally, if you could do that, and you create this great big wide lot, the side yard setbacks are still proportionate to the lot width. The wider your lot gets, the deeper your setbacks get for your side yards, the further
Okay.
away from those side yards are.
All right.
Whereas the smaller house next door to it, even though it's proportionate, they might have much more flexible setbacks. So as you go down the street, it's proportionate as to where the home is located on the middle of the lot.
I see.
So that's building corridor. Again, so that's our second control on height. The third control on height is graduated height. This controls how tall walls are near property lines. So we have a more contemporary style and a more traditional style home. What this states is that if you're to stand on the property line, you have this imaginary 8-foot dimension that goes straight up in the air and a 45-degree angle, which angles in toward the property. There's only a few things that can be above that line. In traditional construction, it's usually the gable or dormers. In more contemporary styles, it's a very little bit of the upper parapet and wall height can be above that line. So you have this factor of 1.7 and 1.4, depending on the type of architecture or wall, which is next to the property line.
And
So
that
that-
seems pretty reasonable as far as building, people are able to do that.
It's worked. You know,
Right.
a lot of our designers have come into conflict with it, but they've been able to design around it.
Great, great.
Well, if you think about it, let's say you're within 11 feet of a property line, you're starting at 8, and for every foot in, you're a foot up. So it's 8 plus 11 is 19 feet. So
Oh,
by the
oh.
time right at that at your side yard, you know, if you're less than 19 feet
you're fine.
with
I
that
see.
particular roof, yeah.
I see.
Yeah. And then the final height control is this idea of mass and scale. So we go through all of these exercises to design our building envelope. However, if your property looks more like a colonial style or plantation style home, the top floor is identical 100% mimics the bottom floor, and you're on a street of ramblers, that's not in compliant with this mass and scale rule. What we try to have them do is downsize the upper levels. They can still have the upper level, but it needs to be size proportion in a way that fits in closer with the existing streetscape.
And how old is this ordinance?
This one hasn't changed since 2007.
Oh, so it's been, okay. I'm just thinking of houses going in, and I'm just wondering when they're 2-story. I'm gonna have to look at that more
Yeah.
closely.
Look at
Is
them
that-
close.
Does that require you to kind of be the design czar?
Unfortunately, it does, because if you look in this ordinance, it doesn't say by how much.
Right. Imagine you have some fun discussions.
Well, especially when they're more contemporary buildings like this.
Yeah, because they're a square.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
This worksheet has got to save you a lot of time, though, in reviewing plans.
It really does. And then also conversations on the phone and in person when people have never looked at our ordinance before and they're just white as a ghost when they come in, they see what they have to review. If we can hand this to them as just a straight out worksheet, I think it's helped out quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
It saves the design professional from having to redesign their building because they didn't look at this first.
Yeah.
Good
I
point.
mean, I can't imagine that happening, but
Me neither. Okay, and then we have our lot coverage. We've talked about lot coverage a lot in lots of other zones. The village zone doesn't have a coverage maximum. This new HCR zone that you're looking at, there are no coverage maximums. However, in residential zones, in the neighborhood office, the professional office zones, they have lot coverage maximums. So based upon your lot size, you have a structure limit and in total impervious surface limit. One is the buildings, all buildings altogether have to be under a certain percentage. And then there's an additional 5%, which takes into account all buildings and driveways and tennis courts and patios and decking and any other surface that would be considered
Outbuilding, is that included in that too?
in the first percentage, yeah.
In the first percentage?
Which building, Jan? What was
I'd
that?
say an outbuilding if it wasn't attached.
Like a
Really-
detached garage or?
House, a detached garage, yeah.
So really good example, at your last meeting, you had Mr. McQuinn
Yes.
proposing a guest house. You permitted him a 2,000 square foot footprint. He still needs to be under these numbers.
Oh, right.
So that means his house is going to be set or designed in a way that he's still under his maximum structure coverage.
I
Oh,
see.
makes
So
sense.
does he fill out this worksheet or no? He
No,
does.
he already has, yes. Mhm.
And it just applies to, I don't know, whatever applies. Do they just skip things that don't apply to them? Or I know he has a whole house, but if say somebody was just adding an ADU to their property, would they just do parts?
I have one just for accessory buildings, yes.
I see. Okay.
I've kind of pulled out anything that has to do with accessory buildings as a completely separate worksheet. Yeah. So then you have okay, so that's the end of that section 4, and then you have a compliance section. And Marianne, this is where you have this setbacks implementation. We put this at the very end because it's easier for, we found that it's easier for residents, property owners to understand when they know what's required, they're showing what's proposed, but then we say in the ordinance, it talks about how you implement those setbacks. If you're not compliant with what's required with the design you've come up with, let's see if we're compliant with this variation allowance. So say in this example, it's a horrible copy, but the setback here needs to be 20 feet. That's this line across here,
Where are you looking at? Oh, right there.
just right
Okay.
here.
Okay.
So what the ordinance says is you can go across, you can build across the setback line up to 15%, maximum 15% for that yard, any yard. Could be the front yard, the side yards, or the rear yard. However, if you're going to cross that line, you have to create and show that you're compliant with the average of those yards by 10 measurements all the way across the front. So in this
Oh, with
example,
10 yards, so 10 neighbors.
no, with 10 equal measurements.
Oh, 10, okay.
So you can
average it.
Yeah,
Average.
you can kind of see their footprint here
Yeah.
jogs away, but then it crosses the line here. So when they average this out with 10 individual measurements, they've averaged it here. They're averaging at 21 point, I think I have that at 21.3. So they're complying with the requirement of a 20-foot yard setback. Even though they can come up to 17 feet with like a porch. This can be the master bedroom addition. This can be the rear deck, something like that, that allows for interest, variation, and flexibility, but still maintaining the requirement. If that makes sense.
Yep.
And then you have similar situation for compliance with height and mass limits. So on the left is your required height, masses, limits, and then your proposed. It should be at or less. And then at the very end, I put our cool little retaining wall because
Oh,
those
yeah.
always have problems when they come back with a site plan.
Yay.
So that's in there. So take a look at that when you have a chance. If you need some help through it, let me know. I can give you lot sizes and widths too, so you can go down through and just sort of predetermine what your setbacks will be on your lot. That will, yeah.
Oh, sorry, John. Do you anywhere further define what is considered impervious surfaces and not? Because there are a lot of hardscape designs that a lot of places consider impervious because of the way they allow moisture to still go into the ground.
No, we left it really open to interpretation by our city engineer
Okay.
because technologies change.
Swimming pools, are they impervious?
They're omitted. They're not considered.
Okay.
One of the reasons why I'd like to have you take a look at this in particular is this open waterway regulation. Whoops, I highlighted too much. Because the reason why we have them check this box is that you have the 100-foot protection area around waterways, correct? So even though you go through this entire workbook, you determine all your setbacks, you essentially have a right to, what the ordinance is telling you, you have a right to build this in this area. However, a lot of this area that's been determined by this workbook and the zoning ordinance might fall within 100 feet of a Big Cottonwood Creek, for example.
Mm.
So right now, what the ordinance says is if any of that building area and it falls within that 100 feet and you're proposing to build within it, you have a right to do that. You can do that. That's your property right. However, the planning commission has to review it and approve it.
Okay, when you're
Just-
saying any of these have to be an open waterway, canal, stream, or ditch that runs water.
That's right.
Yeah, okay,
Natural waterways have the 100 foot.
okay.
The canals have the 20 foot.
Oh,
So is this where you're talking about adding that clarification of the sections that are A, B, C, 25 feet away, 25, 50 feet, so that maybe we don't have to see as many of these?
Exactly.
Excellent. That would be fabulous.
Yep. So when we first incorporated, there were standards from Salt Lake County that had these individual, I'm going to show it. I'll just show these since we're talking about them. These regulations, these protection standards as to what you can and can't do as far as disturbing the ground within that 100-foot area. And it's my opinion that it's possible that they got to this point and tried to write these standards out and maybe either gave up or they're running out of time and they basically just threw it into the planning commission's realm and said, we'll let the planning commission deal with it. Anything that's in 100 feet, planning commission gets to review it and set the standards. That's good and bad. It's great that there's an open process for that and it creates a specific set of regulations depending on what situation you're in. Not every lot is the same. However, it does create some situations where we could get into some arbitrary considerations and applications. So that being said, Jared and I have been able to come up with quite a lengthy set of regulations and standards based upon distances from the waterways. So you have to excuse my sketches here. This is just for discussion purposes. But
it's better than anything I could draw.
Yeah, no, I think it's
Well,
great. I think
Yeah,
the
it's great.
whole idea is
Good to
fantastic.
me.
Yes.
I appreciate that. That's good.
Yeah, it looks
Maybe
great.
we'll just leave it in there as as a sketch.
I would.
Yeah. I
Well,
love it.
basically, if you and Jared can come up with standards that make it easier for us, because basically anytime
I
it comes
agree.
up to us, we're going to say, okay, what does staff and what does the engineer think? And if you guys say yay, then isn't that what we usually do? So
It is what you usually do.
Yes,
But bear in mind, these are public meetings. And sometimes neighbors get involved and neighbors get heated. And there's some issues that arise because of that. So it's better that everybody up and down the stream knows exactly what their neighbors are required to be at, what they're expected to perform at, and what is going to be required of the city, regardless of a public meeting process. So the first element are these zones, A, B, and C. We have our 100-foot protection area. So within your building envelope, when it's created from your zone worksheet, if some of that area falls within 100 feet, it will automatically refer you to this section on what you can and can't do.
oh, that's great.
It's pretty lengthy, and the reason why it's lengthy is because what we've determined is that there's not every property is going to be a clean slate. We're going to have some properties that already have some development in there. We're going to have some properties that may already have accessory buildings. For example, let me see if I can bring up this one really fast. Oh, no, this is in the way. Here we go. So in this example, we have our 50 and our 100-foot buffer from Spring Creek.
Where is this, John?
This is down Murray Holiday Road, just before you get to Valley View.
Okay,
7-Eleven is right here on the corner.
okay,
Spring Creek is a natural waterway, dies at the end of Murray Holiday Road, and then is piped. In fact, it's piped all the way to Jordan from here, Jordan Canal. So you never see Spring Creek after Murray Holiday Road. However, the protections are the same because it could considerably be riparian corridors up and down Spring Creek. So if you apply the 100-foot buffer on either side of the creek, you can see right away there's already structures within that area. And so what do we do when they propose additions, tear down and rebuilds, or simple sheds and such in these buffer areas? So this ordinance tells us what can and can't be back there. If they're going to completely tear down, it gives them provisions to build in place where they used to be, but no closer to the stream. And that's usually where the Planning Commission, more or less, his opinion was when they approved exceptions to these types of applications. Yeah, you can build in place, but you can't get any closer to where you were. Say if it were 40 feet, if it were 45 feet, if it were 50 feet. What Jared and I have done is we've codified that in language, so that is now the standard. So for example, this home, if they were to tear down and rebuild, they're approximately, I'd say 70 to 75 feet away from the water's edge. They could tear this home down and rebuild it at no closer than 70 feet. We've already established that disturbance, essentially is the notion.
Hmm. So you're saying the dark blue is 70,
The dark blue is actually 50.
50,
Mhm.
and then it
Yeah.
goes
Both
another
sides.
20?
Yeah.
Okay,
Can you say that
Um,
again? So it's the dark blue is
The dark blue is 50 feet from the water,
50
and
feet
then
from the water.
the whole section is 100.
oh, it
Okay.
is 100, okay.
So the light blue is another 50 feet.
That's right.
Okay.
So 50 and 50. Mhm.
It's just scale. Okay, that makes
Now,
sense.
do we just, as a general rule, don't have people build within that dark blue? Is that kind of where you draw the line? But if
That's-
they're into the light blue, that's probably okay.
That's right. 50 feet is the absolute cutoff, how we've written throughout this ordinance. Unless you already have a structure within 50 feet. And it was built legally, you're grandfathered at that depth and no closer.
Is that because it was built probably because before the city was incorporated?
Yes, they have to prove that they had a permit for it. If they can't, then it defaults to 50 feet.
Okay.
Oh, interesting. There's some big homes there.
There are, yes. And another notion that we really got hung up on, I've noticed in the past, especially while you are wrangling with this issue, is where does that 50 and 100 foot, where do those distances start from? Is it the waterway? Is it the middle of the waterway? Is it the edge of the waterway? Is it the top of the bank? You know, where does this dimension begin? And what Jared has brightly done, he's gone out and researched a majority of other cities who has similar ordinances and protections and have defined this notion of the high water mark. And that is probably one of the most critical elements of this ordinance, is what is the high water mark and how it's delineated. So this definition is essentially an industry standard for environmental scientists. Specifically right here, the horizontal, located at the horizontal soil and vegetative boundary, which distinguishes between predominantly aquatic and predominantly terrestrial lands.
Where are you
That-
reading from?
right here.
Wait, I'm seeing you've got the graduated height.
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
Oh, right.
That makes
Okay,
more
yeah.
sense.
I'm thinking, okay, I must be crazy or something because I don't know what
No,
you're
because
talking
I'm like, where is he reading?
about. Yeah, exactly.
You know that yellow boundary that usually gives you around what screen you're sharing? I don't have that on right now.
Oh,
Okay, sorry, I'll be more. Yeah, thank you for stopping me. So right here is where we've defined what that high water level is.
Excellent.
And if we can't find it, the city engineer gets to decide where it goes.
okay.
It's normally not the case, but
Now is Jared, our city engineer or do we contract with him?
we contract with him,
Okay,
yes. So in all these cases, whenever we write ordinances, we always defer to a position, just in case it changes. We'll always be city engineer.
mm-hmm,
If for some reason the department can't quite figure out where that annual high water level is, there are volumes of case law and treatises and all kinds of legal publications on defining the sort of precise point where the annual high water level is, or whatever that might be worth.
Thanks. No, that's helpful. And luckily, especially with our canals, that water level usually doesn't change throughout the year. Spring Creek doesn't usually change. Big Cottonwood Creek does fluctuate up and down.
and which one were you showing us, Spring Creek?
That was Spring Creek.
I still am having a hard time figuring out where there's a 7-Eleven on Murray Holiday Road.
Oh, I've been scratching my head for 5 minutes trying to figure that out.
So John, show us that map again and give us a little more
It's
direct.
just east of the post office.
Not
Oh,
Murray Holiday
It's on
Boulevard.
it's on
Holiday
Arbor Lane.
Boulevard. Oh,
A boulevard.
yes. Okay, so you're talking the, not the 7-Eleven, but the Phillips 66? That where you're-
Chevron.
Yes,
Yeah,
Phillips 66. but
Chevron or whatever it is. Okay. Okay, now I understand. Yes, okay.
I was thinking it was clear up 3000 East or something like that. Isn't there another 7-Eleven up there
There is.
Well, there you-
Yep.
heading to the freeway?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can see the food truck park. Soho.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay.
It's an old photo, but yeah.
Yes.
Soho's up here.
right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm for sure not as crazy as I thought I was. Thanks, Marty, for chiming in and letting me know I wasn't crazy.
No, that's my fault. So as far as defining some elements of this waterway protection section and what those zones entail, the other element is determining whether or not you have a undeveloped piece of property. You're seeing the text here that I'm highlighting, right?
Yes.
Yes.
we
Okay,
are.
good. Undeveloped land or developed land. Developed land are obviously going to have already many more impacts and disturbances than undeveloped property. Undeveloped property, if we go through a subdivision plat, they're going to have applied to it the 50-foot limit, and that's it. There might be some elements in here in developed property. So if you had, picture yourself having property on Big Cottonwood Creek, if you're so lucky, and you have, for example, we have questions on how I can remove trees or how I can plant trees.
Yes,
Or what types of fencing or decks I can put in there. We have hopefully determined the type of decking that can be, and patios and stairways and fencing that can be placed within these 25, the 50 and the 100-foot sections. So this isn't entirely clean yet. Hopefully we're going to have it completed this week. Jared and I are going to meet twice and finish this up for you.
great.
So we can have this for your first public hearing, but this is a good draft. It has not much of the concepts here will change to review and become familiar with what this protection ordinance does for development near waterways.
Yeah, because we've always had issues or questions when this has come up.
Mhm.
Yes, yep.
That's fantastic work, John. Thank you.
Yes.
All right,
Here.
well,
And thank
yeah,
Thank you.
Jared too, because this is hours and hours of work behind the scenes to make things easier for us.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. And it'll be easier for, all residents too. I mean, the hard part here is when it's like what Paul used to say, whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
You create a restriction here, but it pops up, some issue pops up on this side. So we're running modeling all the time on it. So,
Yeah, great.
so that'll be coming to you as part of this list here. Let's see if I can bring it up in our packet.
You mean we're
There's
gonna
that.
find unintended consequences down the road?
Go
Never
figure.
played whack-a-mole. Are you saying the category 1 and 2?
Yes. I'm trying to get that to pop up here.
Chris has left us. He had another Zoom meeting at 7.
Okay.
So he
Yeah, but
just,
we got Elisa instead, so I think
Right.
we've upgraded.
Welcome, Elisa.
Okay, so that waterway, what we've considered as a category 2, not a priority, but however, engineering and our public works wants it in place before the water flows, and we get a lot of our new building construction this spring.
yeah,
So I placed a priority on it, and it's
great.
gonna fall within these category 2s. Category 2s are usually legislative or city council required amendments. So this category 1 is
Oh,
2018, 2019 legislative session. There's a micro tower telecommunications ordinance that was required of all municipalities to find places for micro towers. We've written that ordinance in draft form. It's being I guess you could use the term vetted with legal counsel before you see it. So I would suspect you'd see that your second meeting in February and maybe your first meeting in March, depending how well it goes.
great.
Conditional uses, this is a request from the state legislation that basically says, make sure you have language in there that states that if it's a conditional use, it's an allowed use. I guess we had a lot of rogue municipalities who were still denying conditional uses without solid findings. So it got the attention of the legislature, and they came down hard on municipalities saying, if it's conditional use, it's allowed, and make sure it's written in your ordinance that way. Otherwise,
Is
get
it
rid of them.
yours written that way?
It is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Allowed with conditions.
With
right?
conditions, yes. This LUDMA, this role of PC vacation withholding certificates of occupancy, I think this is already done. I have to check with Todd. I think he checked on that one. I think that one's completed. This House Bill 29, you won't see. This is a building code amendments. We have to update our ordinance to mimic all building code amendments that the state comes down with. Even though, and Chris will know, since he's gone now, but even though there's a building code that's established, every state has their own amendments based upon local construction. It's not normal or abnormal. The nuisance ordinance prohibiting municipalities from imposing criminal penalties in violation of ordinance. We were right in the middle of rewriting our code enforcement ordinance because we are now with UPD. We are no longer administrative enforcement program. We are now a criminal penalty. So in 2020, every nuisance ordinance that's referred to as such, and Marty can probably help on interpreting that, it has to be removed of any type of criminal violation of the ordinance, unless it's some type of nuisance. So a use, so you approve a conditional use for a home occupation. They have now expanded the use and now are accepting customers daily, every hour, much more over the levels that you originally allowed. If we can consider that as a nuisance, we could possibly consider a criminal penalty for that.
Oh, interesting.
But we have to find it as being a nuisance to the community, and sometimes that's extremely difficult.
John, do we currently have any ordinances that have criminal penalties that are sort of on the line, questionable?
Yes. Right now, at the top of my head, I'm thinking short-term rentals.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what happened to that? We wanted them fined and, you know, all kinds of things to happen to them. Are you
Well-
saying we can't enforce that anymore?
That's where we are scratching our heads on how to do this. You can connect the dots here. Usually legislative sessions are very property owner, pro property owners. And, you know, when they come up with an ordinance or a legislative bill like this, it's usually meaning that one municipality or another has enforced a criminal penalty on a land use violation, specifically a short-term rental. So you can see here, if it's considered a nuisance, unless it's considered a nuisance, then you probably won't be able to consider penalties for criminal violations. But no, we're on that matter. We're still pursuing that criminally.
Yeah, well,
Well, because it's illegal, right?
That's right.
Well, legislature sides with an Airbnb, and you can't use an Airbnb site to go against a short-term rental. You can't use their listing. Aren't I correct on that?
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure even this upcoming legislative session that just began today, watch those proposals, those bills. Usually there's quite a hefty amount of them which are land use oriented.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure ADUs and STRs will come up again.
Yeah.
House Bill 388. This is a section that I'm going to propose to the City Council for consideration on policy, which allows a planning commission the ability or staff the ability to review subdivision plats if they're only consist of 2 lots. There's 3 or more lots, the planning commission can review them, being the land use authority. But in order to speed development along in some municipalities, the legislature has allowed a staff administrative approval for a 2-lot plat.
That's great.
I'm not sure how well that'll go over with the council. We'll see how that handles. I mean, I'd be interested in your opinion offline, what you think about that.
I think we wanted that a couple of years ago. We wanted
We-
those approved at the counter.
We did, and this last session allowed that.
I think it'd be great.
Yeah, perfect. So I'll put that on the list as well.
Okay.
I've got to double check in our sections for DABC and restricted use for tobacco and alcohol. I'm not sure if this will come to you because it's in the business licensing section. It talks about age restrictions. It redefines the distances from public spaces that a retailer can be located. And it redefines what a tobacco retailer specialty business is because of the
Vaping.
exactly, the introduction of vaping and electronic cigarettes.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that'll come to you. So those are our category ones that are at the forefront right now. There's some others that are not so important, but we need to get these codified right away, or we risk being in violation of LUDMA, the Land Use Management Act. I put this one up here. It's not highlighted, but we are currently under a moratorium right now. The City Council enacted a moratorium on recreational structures, specifically as they relate to skateboard ramps. So we're looking at a new section, a new amendment to our noise violation ordinance, which is not in Chapter 13, which is Chapter 13 is where the Planning Commission has purview. But it'd be very similar to, Marianne might remember, our swimming pool ordinance, which we enacted about 5 years ago, which placed hours restrictions on when those pools can be used, splashing, noise, music, those types of things that are related to pools. We lengthened the hours till 10 o'clock at night. interestingly enough, specifically skateboard ramps are singled out as not allowed use. And right now during COVID, we have several residential properties that have skateboard ramps, and we're getting calls and complaints. And specifically, Councilwoman Peterson reviewed this and said, "Now we need to find out a way that these kids can play in the backyard reasonably."
Are these ramps permanent or just temporary structures that they try to build?
Sometimes they're permanent. Yeah, these are actual wooden ramps, half pipes or 3/4
Have
pipes.
any that are like poured concrete?
No, they're usually just sitting framed on a concrete pad. Yeah.
So these are people who are building these in their backyards, and people are complaining about the noise after hours or
Noise,
during the day?
noise, period.
Hmm.
The ordinance says shall prohibit any skate ramps to be built in any zone anywhere. It's a really old ordinance. I didn't even know it was there. I was quite embarrassed when Councilwoman Peterson called me.
Oh, that's
Um,
what it says now? It
That's what it
says
says
there.
now.
It's
Oh,
prohibited. Interesting.
And what we have to fix is you can't regulate a land use in your noise ordinance section.
Huh.
Yeah, you have to write it that it's allowed, but within a certain time frame, like swimming pools. You can't
Well,
just say,
would that go for tennis courts, pickleball courts, basketball courts, things like that in people's yards?
Those are all restricted on hours too?
that's how the council wrote the moratorium, to make sure that we capture all of those uses.
I see.
The ordinance right now focuses on skateboard ramps.
Okay,
So
interesting. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
it might roll over into chapter 13. So that's why I put it on there. But
Okay.
I doubt it.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So category 2, we talked about those accessory dwelling units.
Uh-huh.
Big question mark right now on these because we're waiting to see what this current legislative session says.
Right.
There are rumors in the wind about further restricting what municipalities can and can't do. So we may wait until this new session pans itself out, and we'll bring forth a draft amendment. The council has already. Oh, go ahead.
Where does this put our affordable housing plan then?
In limbo.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
So all of that is on hold until this issue is addressed?
Well, we have adopted the intent of addressing ADU units. So we still are on the hook for adopting an ordinance, but we just want to make sure we don't adopt something that could be possibly in violation with state legislation. And it's quite possible that legislation is going to be in terms of money, how much we're imposing for a permit on the homeowner, if we're imposing impact fees, if there's a license that we need to apply, things of that manner, monetary issues. I think that's specifically where this is going to be headed. Some municipalities that are allowing them are heavily licensing them and maybe heavily feeing them through building permits. Chapter 13.7.1, this one will be really easy. It's just clarifying any part of the ordinance that has a should with a shall. It's a regulatory section, and some other really needful clarifications on design. Marianne made mention of that last time we met.
Yes.
Our chapter 13.88, the non-conforming uses and structures, needs to be completely rewritten so that it jives legally with recent court cases nationwide. It's an extremely old section of ordinance that talks about what do we do when we have, like Chris mentioned earlier, a non-conforming use or a structure. So for example, you want to have an addition put on your home, you go back and do or complete that R1 worksheet for our department, and we find out that some of your setbacks are already non-conforming because they were built to a previous time. Basically, what the ordinance states now is that you can't expand on it, period. And a lot of municipalities have created some flexibility in that and allowing for some expansion as long as the impact is minimal. So that we're rewriting that entire thing. That's something that our legal counsel needs to review. Historic preservation section is a complete update of policy and clarifications. I think you saw in the news a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a property on Walker Lane that was demolished
Yes.
that could possibly have been considered as historic.
Yeah.
Wasn't on our historic list, but if that property were to come to us now to be reviewed and be placed on our list, the process is really convoluted. It needs to be clarified. There's some circular references in there that needs to be fixed, and you'll see those later.
Question, doesn't the person who owns the land have to approach you to want to be on the historic list?
That's right.
So even if it was historic, if the home or the landowners don't want it so designated, we can't force them.
No.
Okay.
We can probably, the Historic Commission can probably keep a list of properties they deem that have historical value. However, the property owner needs to approach the state register and the city to be placed on a list.
Otherwise, Jonathan, they have free reign to demolish a structure if they so see fit. Yes?
Yes. In fact, you can demolish a structure that's on a historic preservation list. There's nothing to prevent you from demolishing your own home that's on a historic preservation list. What the list does provide you, say for example, your home is on the historic list, it provides you some uses that aren't normally allowed in the residential zone.
Okay.
A museum, we have a historic dairy on Spring Lane. They've approached me several times on having a small ice cream shop in there. They can do that if it's related to the historical use.
Oh, that's awesome.
So there's some benefits to having a property on a historic preservation list because it allows for flexibility on the use of the land, not just strictly residential or strictly commercial. You can have some uses that weren't necessarily tied to that older property. So fee schedule, you're definitely not going to be able to see that. We talked about minor subdivisions, the possibility for amendments.
Yeah.
Amendments for a 2-lot plat. And then this idea of this omnibus element, these are going to be given to you in a lump review, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to see if you had an opportunity, if you can, review your own properties with that R1 worksheet so that when we get to accessory buildings or gates or allowable yard encroachments, you know the background. And so you can, I think you can make a little quicker, more educated decision on when that gets there.
Ooh,
And
yeah,
I'm-
I like that private gate setback change. 18 feet's too far.
It is. It's really restrictive when you're
is.
talking about residential properties.
And is there any way you can get around that right now, or is that set in stone?
Not without a variance, no.
Oh, you could get a variance.
Yes, you could get a variance. Mhm.
Okay. It all sounds
Um,
great, John. I can't believe how much work you guys have done to get to this.
Here,
point.
here. Yeah.
My
Well,
goodness.
it's taken way too long. Honestly, we should have had this back to you in November. So this is just our first timeline. This will change dramatically as we go along.
Cool.
But majority of this, we would like to have it done before the end of this fiscal year, being July 1st. Some of these are already in process,
Mhm.
and this will change as you go. But just to really give you an idea of background of what's coming your way, really intense, probably the first meeting in February.
But don't we have other things coming too? This is part of,
This will be part of it, and your agendas will be quite hefty for the first part of the year
yeah,
because we also have some rezones they're getting quite anxious.
okay,
Some decisions.
okay.
Are you comfortable with having multiple rezones on one agenda?
I am, as long as it depends on how complicated they are.
Yeah, how much public hearing you're expecting?
Yeah.
Yeah, how much controversy.
Well, the
If-
rezones.
Yeah,
No, but they aren't always, controversial. If it's a reasonable rezone request, given the area and the location, that kind of
for
thing.
instance, the one on Viewmont, we've already looked at it, and a lot of us commented, if you would have come for a rezone for 2 homes instead of 3, we probably would have said, okay, even the neighbors agreed.
Sure.
So
Okay.
to me, that's kind of an easier one because we've already seen it and seemed reasonable if they would have come to that with us in the beginning.
Sure. Okay. Understood.
Yeah,
Well, I'll put a couple on there that aren't so controversial.
okay, okay.
Great. That's all I have unless you have any questions.
Thank you,
Any-
Jonathan, as
Yeah.
always.
Super helpful.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good.
John-
Anything else?
Yeah, one question, John, regarding rezones. When people want to jump multiple zones, do you ever kind of discourage them or say, traditionally one zone or 2 zones, but when they're wanting, a jump of 4 zones, do you try?
I do. I do. When we first meet with them at the counter and they're proposing a zone change and we've noticed that they've skipped one or multiple zones, we do have the conversation and say, let's take a step back. Is this looking for the utmost possible redevelopment for your bang for your buck? Because considerably, if you're looking at the general plan and what the community is really looking for, a zone change in of itself is difficult anyway. When you start skipping zones, you automatically are presumed as trying to be
Greedy.
Greedy.
Right, and I think that was brought up when they came.
Yeah,
And yeah, usually the conversation is it's not going to go over very well, but it's your right. You can have the right
Correct.
to propose
Yeah.
it.
Correct. Yeah.
all right, well, thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah. Mhm.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Artie Banks, making a motion to adjourn the meeting on January 19th, 2021.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I think you need a second.
I don't need a second on a motion to adjourn. All in-
Aye.
Okay,
Bye, everyone.
we've adjourned at 7:23 PM. Thanks, everybody.
See y'all.
Thank you.
And